The night air carried the faint hum of city traffic as Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, preparing to close his small, grease-stained garage in East Los Angeles. His days were long and quiet, fixing old engines, restoring forgotten cars, and finding peace in the rhythmic sound of tools and metal. Just as he flipped the lights off, the distant rumble of a tow truck echoed down the street. A red Ferrari, sleek, exotic, and completely out of place in his modest shop, rolled in under the harsh glow of the fluorescent lights. Ethan frowned, curious. From the shadows stepped Victoria Lane, the woman who owned half the city's automotive industry. Tall, confident, and wearing a sharp black business suit that screamed success, she moved like someone used to being obeyed. Her presence made the small garage feel smaller. "You're Ethan?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, polite but firm. Victoria gestured to the Ferrari. "This car is worth $2.5 million. It broke down during a test drive. I was told you're the best independent mechanic in the area. Fix it and name your price." Her words hung heavy. Ethan studied the car, a machine so fine it almost breathed on its own. "It's not about price," he said calmly. Victoria tilted her head, slightly amused. "No one's ever said that to me," she replied, crossing her arms. Her eyes glimmered with challenge. Then, after a long pause, she added with a teasing smile, "Fine, fix it and you can marry my daughter." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Ethan raised an eyebrow, half surprised, half amused. "Ma'am," he said with quiet confidence, "I fix engines, not people's lives." For a moment, even she didn't know how to respond. Victoria studied him, the calloused hands, the calm voice, the grounded humility. He wasn't intimidated by her money or her name. Most people bent around her presence like weak metal, but Ethan stood steady. "You've got confidence," she muttered, a faint smirk forming. "Confidence isn't arrogance," he replied. "It's knowing your worth, even when others don't see it." For the first time that evening, she didn't have a ready answer. There was something disarming about him, a man who worked with dirt and oil, but spoke with a kind of quiet wisdom that couldn't be bought. As she turned to leave, Ethan lifted the Ferrari's hood and began examining the engine. The damage was extensive, a cracked manifold, wiring faults, and a temperamental turbo system. Yet he worked with focus, as if each part had a story to tell. Through the night, the sound of tools echoed like a heartbeat. Outside, the city slept, but inside the small garage, a masterpiece was being reborn by the hands of a man who cared more about precision than profit. Somewhere deep down, Victoria knew she'd found someone rare, someone money couldn't control. By dawn, Ethan was still working, his eyes heavy but determined. The Ferrari wasn't just a car to him. It was a challenge, a test of patience and trust. Every bolt, every wire carried his dedication. When the final turn of the wrench came, the engine purred to life, low, powerful, flawless. Ethan smiled faintly, satisfied not by payment, but by perfection. He leaned back, stretching his sore arms, and whispered to himself, "Every machine deserves respect." For him, that was enough. He didn't know that his words would soon echo far beyond his small workshop. The next morning, Victoria Lane returned, expecting failure. Her black SUV rolled to a stop, and she stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement. But as she entered, her eyes widened. The Ferrari gleamed under the sunlight, restored to its full glory. Ethan stood beside it, wiping oil from his hands. "How?" she asked softly, almost disbelieving. "Patience and respect," he replied. "Every machine responds to care." The simplicity of his answer struck her harder than any lecture. For someone who lived in a world of deals and deadlines, his quiet dedication felt almost foreign. Victoria smiled for the first time in years. A genuine, unguarded smile. "You're not like anyone I've met," she said. "Maybe," Ethan replied with a shrug. "You've been meeting the wrong kind of people." Just then, her daughter Lily stepped out from the SUV, young, kind-eyed, and elegant. She watched Ethan with quiet admiration. "You didn't do it for the deal?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "I did it because I love what I do." Victoria exchanged a look with her daughter. Pride, surprise, and maybe even a little respect. For once, money hadn't won the day. As the Ferrari's engine roared to life, it wasn't just metal that moved. It was perspective. Victoria saw in Ethan what her empire lacked: sincerity. "You've done what my team couldn't," she said. "You've reminded me that real value isn't in money, but in mastery." Ethan smiled humbly. "Cars, people, they're not so different," he said. "They both need understanding." Before leaving, Victoria extended her hand. "You've earned my respect, Mr. Ethan," she said warmly. And for the first time in her career, the deal she offered had no price tag, only gratitude. That night, when Ethan closed his garage again, he glanced at the Ferrari's reflection fading into the city lights. It wasn't just another repair, it was a reminder of why he loved his craft. Somewhere in Los Angeles, a CEO had learned that not everything could be bought, and a mechanic had proven that true worth is found not in wealth, but in passion. The hum of the city faded into silence, and the man who fixed engines smiled, knowing he'd done something greater than repair a car. He'd repaired a perspective. Days later, the air outside Ethan's small Los Angeles garage was thick with heat and dust. The morning sun cast golden streaks across the street as he tightened the final bolt on the gleaming red Ferrari. The car looked like a jewel, polished, powerful, and alive again. He stepped back and exhaled, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. For days, he'd barely slept, surviving on coffee, willpower, and an unshakable belief that every machine, no matter how broken, could be brought back to life if treated with care. He wasn't just fixing a car. He was proving something deeper. When Victoria Lane's black SUV rolled into the lot, the air seemed to shift. She stepped out with the same commanding presence as before, confident, precise, used to control. Her assistant followed close behind, clipboard in hand. But as she approached the garage, expecting chaos and excuses, she stopped. There it was, the Ferrari, radiant in the sunlight, humming quietly like a living creature. For the first time in a long while, Victoria had no words. Her reflection shimmered in the car's flawless surface. She turned to Ethan, disbelief etched on her face. "How did you do it?" Ethan didn't look up right away. He finished tightening the last screw, then calmly stood and wiped his hands with a rag streaked with oil. "Patience," he said simply, "and respect. Every machine responds to care." Victoria frowned slightly, trying to hide the wave of emotion that stirred within her. She wasn't used to humility, especially not from someone like him. Most people tried to impress her with money or ambition. But this man, standing in his grease-stained overalls, seemed to measure value in effort, not in dollars. That quiet confidence unsettled her and intrigued her. Her daughter, Lily, stepped out of the SUV, her soft curls glowing in the sunlight. She'd heard about this mechanic, the one her mother had teased with a ridiculous proposal. "You didn't do it for the deal, did you?" she asked, her voice gentle. Ethan met her eyes and shook his head with a faint smile. "No, ma'am. I did it because I love what I do." Lily looked at the Ferrari, then back at him. There was something deeply honest about his tone, something that spoke louder than pride or ambition. It was the voice of a man who built, not boasted. Victoria folded her arms, observing him carefully. For years, she had built her empire on precision, speed, and results, not patience. To her, efficiency was everything. Yet this man, working from a small corner garage with tools older than her company's logo, had accomplished what her top engineers could not. The irony stung her pride, but it also awakened something long buried: admiration. "You worked through the night?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "I said I'd fix it," he replied. "A promise is a promise." His words struck her with unexpected weight. Promises, she realized, were something she'd forgotten to value. Lily walked around the Ferrari, touching its hood as if it were a work of art. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ethan smiled modestly. "Not perfect," he said. "Just cared for." His words lingered in the air, heavier than they sounded. Victoria watched her daughter, truly smiling for the first time in months, and something in her heart softened. She remembered her late husband, a man who used to talk about passion, craftsmanship, and dignity in work. Back then she'd been different, less cold, more human. Somewhere along her climb to success, she had traded that warmth for control. Victoria took a deep breath, her voice lower now, no longer sharp, but thoughtful. "Do you realize what you've done, Ethan?" she asked. He looked at her with calm sincerity. "Fixed a car," he replied. She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "You reminded me what real work looks like." The garage went quiet except for the low hum of the Ferrari's engine. Ethan didn't need to speak. His silence carried truth, that integrity didn't need applause, and that character wasn't built by wealth, but by devotion to one's craft. It was a language she hadn't heard in years. Victoria's eyes drifted to her daughter again, who was watching Ethan with quiet admiration. The realization struck her. It wasn't just the car that was repaired. Something in her own heart had been too. She smiled, not her usual corporate smirk, but something genuine and soft. "Maybe," she said gently, "you deserve far more than my offer." Ethan smiled back almost shyly. "Ma'am," he said, "what I have is enough. I get to do what I love every day. That's more than most people can say." Victoria nodded slowly, deeply moved. "You're a rare kind of man, Mr. Ethan." As Victoria turned to leave, the sun caught the Ferrari's mirror finish, throwing a red shimmer across the pavement. She paused, taking one last look at the small, humble garage that had just taught her a lesson her millions never could. "My father used to say," she murmured half to herself, "that greatness isn't about what you own, but what you build." Ethan only smiled. "Then I guess your father was a wise man." She nodded, her eyes soft with respect. Lily smiled too, sensing something between them, not romance, but recognition. Two worlds finally understanding each other. That night, after the garage lights dimmed and the street grew quiet, Ethan sat by the workbench, staring at his tools. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, familiar, comforting, grounding. He thought of Victoria's words, of Lily's smile, of the Ferrari that had once been broken and now stood whole again. For him, this wasn't just another job completed. It was proof that even in a city driven by speed and greed, there was still room for people who believed in patience, respect, and love for their craft. Outside, the stars glimmered faintly, quiet witnesses to a small, beautiful victory. The next morning, when Ethan opened the garage again, he found a note on the workbench, neatly folded beside a check. It wasn't the money that caught his attention. It was the words written beneath, "For reminding me what real value is. Thank you." "Victoria Lane." Ethan smiled to himself and tucked the note in his jacket pocket. The Ferrari's echo had faded into the distance, but its memory and what it represented stayed. Sometimes, he thought, the richest people weren't those who owned the most, but those who still knew how to care.